You're listening to Three Kitchens podcast, hosted by home cooks Aaron Walker and Heather Dyer.
Join us as we walk you through our experience with a new recipe, successes and fails. Let's all get inspired, cook better, and eat great food.
Welcome to the Three Kitchens podcast. Today we have two very special guests.
The baking scraps. We've got Lisa and
Cristina. Welcome, Aaron and Heather. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Man, you guys are the best guest hosts we've had because you've just stepped right into the position.
That was so good.
We kind of know the drill.
Well, that was great. Thanks for opening the show. That's so great. Now that you've introduced yourselves, Lisa and Cristina from the Baking Scraps podcast, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So our podcast, we like to say that it's by bakers, for bakers, and about bakers. And basically that sums it up completely. We are bakers. We do a lot of baking in our regular lives, but we do follow a lot of baking shows. And so through social media, we've come to know a lot of these former competitors and current competitors on baking shows, like the Great Canadian Baking Show, the Spring Baking Championship, Holiday Baking Championship now, Crime Scene Kitchen, a few others. And so we have been able to get a lot of insights from them. So we regularly have guests who have been on these baking shows. Currently, we are also recapping the whole entire season that is airing of the Great Canadian Baking Show. And we have a really great couple of guys who both were in the Great Canadian Baking Show who join us for the recaps. So regularly, we have a weekly recap with the fabulous Baker Boys,
As we call them.
as we call them.
And
Yeah.
we also have the great opportunity and privilege of interviewing a lot of the bakers. And usually we interview them right after they get eliminated, like a couple of days afterwards.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it's been really cool. So of late, we've been dropping 2 episodes, one being the recap episode on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
And on the Thursday, we've dropped the interview with the baker that has just recently been sent home. So it's been a lot
busy.
of fun. Yeah, it's busy, but it's been so great to have the conversations, to get that further insight from the bakers themselves about their experience, how they got onto the show to begin with,
Yeah.
why they enjoy baking, just getting their whole journey, baking journey out to our audience. So it's been wonderful conversations, and
Yeah.
it's so great to have not only the support of the bakers, but also the Great Canadian Baking Show that kind of gave us the opportunity to be able to do this.
Yeah, they've been really, really great about allowing us access to the bakers and trusting us with their stories and knowing that the bakers are not going to spill any beans that they're not supposed to. And if they accidentally do that, we will not show it to anybody. So it's been really great to have that connection. We've also had other people, like we've had writers, we've had
Baking supply store owners. We've had other social media, Instagram
bakers.
influencers.
We had the judges from the Great Canadian Baking Show. That was pretty cool to have Bruno and Tyler on. That was really awesome. And they all make these connections together. So we're just growing our baking family.
Yeah. And we're so grateful that everybody is just so gracious and so open to come and have a conversation with us as well. Because of course we couldn't do this without any of their support. So it's really cool for us to be on this journey and just have all of that love and support from all of these incredible, really the entire baking community has just been so wonderful and extended their arms to welcome us into their communities. So it's been really special for us and humbling, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just still stuck on putting out 2 episodes a week.
Yeah, we are too.
Right, Aaron? Like, can you imagine?
You've stepped up the hardcore hobby and made it even more.
Go big or go home, right? Like,
I'm pretty exhausted.
and you know, the funny thing is we didn't even start talking about this until the middle of May. We actually started talking about, we should probably just start a podcast. In fact, it was our husband's prodding that actually got us here, because we had just gotten over the fact that we didn't make it onto the Great Canadian Baking Show again. And we were both a little sad and disappointed, and we were moping around maybe just a little bit. And
we were crying on each other's shoulders.
yeah, we were.
Which is allowable.
Yeah. And
Aw.
and our husbands, who've never met each other, have never had a conversation, each individually came up to us and said, "Why don't you guys just do your own thing?"
Yeah.
Mm.
We just started talking about it together,
Yeah.
and we're like, oh, both of our husbands think this would be a good thing, for us to put ourselves out there. We're a great team. We obviously clicked the second that we met each other,
Mhm.
and our husbands have seen that. They're
Yeah.
like, you guys act like you've known each other for years and years and years. We only met a year ago.
Yeah, in real life. We've been following each other
For a while.
on Instagram for probably 3 years.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
But we didn't
somewhere
really
there.
talk much.
No, we engaged on each other's pages and supported each other's, content and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Love it.
From the middle of May, talking about it, we dropped our first episode June 4th.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then bonus episodes with this season of Great Canadian Baking Show.
We're up close to 30 episodes now.
Yeah,
Wow, that is
Wow.
fantastic.
yeah, that's fast.
it
That's
is.
amazing.
And sure, I knew how to do a podcast.
No.
I didn't know anything about any part of it. So it's been quite a learning curve.
Oh, for sure it is. We were the same.
Especially the tech side.
Yes.
Hmm.
Oh, I love this. I love that you've taken something that you're so passionate about and then found your own avenue to do it on, right? Like, and creating your community of people around you that support you. And yeah, that's fantastic. That's the type of things we're here for in the food world.
Hmm.
And that's the great thing about the community is that everybody is just so wonderful and
Mhm.
open to having those conversations and sharing their baking wins as well as their baking fails and tips and tricks. And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful space to be in. It's a wonderful village of people. And we're all aligned by the same common thread, which is our passion for creating beautiful things.
Deliciousness.
Yeah, and deliciousness.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you met because you had both auditioned for the show. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of auditioning and how that works, and how many people
Oh my gosh.
go through this process? How many people are auditioning for this?
Lots.
And that's just an estimate.
in the, in the bigger cities, you get lots of people, and they used to have the live casting where you would, send in an application, then you would bake something and you would bring it to, the nearest big city where they're hosting auditions. So
Okay.
for me, I had to come from Victoria to Vancouver. She lives in White Rock, so it's a lot easier for her to get to the Vancouver auditions. So they used to do that every year, and so Toronto and Calgary, maybe Edmonton,
I think they've had
they would have
Montreal.
like a few base cities where they would be casting. And then COVID happened, and then the show got a lot bigger. And so there were many more people interested, but also they had to do everything differently. So they started doing it by Zoom. So it would be an application, then you get a Zoom phone call, then you move on to a Zoom audition, quite a multi-step process. And then of course, waiting to hear whether you've been selected, and then getting your rejection email, which is always very, very lovely and supremely kindly worded.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of people trying out now. So, and it really does
Wow.
depend on the location. So now they added starting last year or the year before even.
The year
Yeah, the year
before they started the in-person
They would have
auditions,
open calls.
castings.
Oh,
So as well as doing the application online and then making it possibly several steps down that process, they also held open calls. So anybody who wanted to, even if they hadn't filled out the application, could just come show up at the open casting call with whatever they baked.
So, but this year in January, they had one in Vancouver. So we both went to that. Thankfully, we showed up early because
Yeah.
there were a lot of people.
And we stayed overnight in the hotel that they were having this event. So
Smart.
expensive. And my cake was like gigantic.
It was beautiful.
Huge. Brought it on this big like luggage cart.
It was massive.
It was massive. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we got off the elevator and there was someone who had casting or crew written on his shirt. And we were like, oh, sorry, we're just checking to see. And he's like, no, come on. Partially because my cake was so honking huge. And partially because I was there early, I was the first one to get in and see everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was number 5.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I
wow.
got early. Just because
Super
it was
Bowl.
Super Bowl Sunday on the day of the open casting, and I'm a big football fan, so I'm like, okay, I got to get in, I got to get the audition done, and then I've got to go home, get changed. Very, very frantic day, but a fun one though. And I wish I'd stayed longer because the energy in the room was amazing. And like Lisa said, some of the past bakers from other seasons were there mingling. It was beautiful. It was a really nice, again, being surrounded by people who share your passion. There's just such magic with that.
I love what you're saying about the Great Canadian Baking Show being like a really positive and uplifting environment, because I was just saying to Heather before we recorded this that I think that show is like the nicest competitive show and makes us look, I don't know if they edit it to make it look that way, but we look like the nicest people in the world that are like, oh, let me help you with that here. And you know, like it's all very supportive, and like people take their time and energy to help other people they're competing against. And I'm like, oh, this is like the most Canadian content ever.
Yeah, it really, really is. And I think it's multifaceted, because the way that the casting team pulls together the cast every season, I mean, honestly, they are the sweetest, nicest, and just such great human beings. And they do this season after season after season. Yeah, it's amazing. From day one, there's just this instant connection, family bond that just is magical. And yes, and we are Canadians, so that niceness always comes naturally to us too. Plus, there's no money in it, right? You win a cake plate at the end of the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a competition, but really it's like a geeky baking.
All you get is bragging rights, but you want them, and you want them honestly, right? That you don't want to be like, oh yeah, I won because I kicked the other lady in the shins, you know?
Exactly. Totally.
But yeah, it's taken a lot of the disappointment away, because I realized that the casting team knows what they're doing. And they have found the perfect mix of bakers every time. And if I haven't been in any of those other past 8 seasons, it's because I wasn't the right mix for that particular season. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
It really is a nice little diverse mix of people every season.
It really is.
I guess that I never thought about, as a viewer, you don't always think about what maybe goes into that happening. You think, oh, isn't that so nice? Well, it's not just by chance.
No. And, you know, everybody can bake. Everybody who makes it into that tent is so incredibly skilled and talented. And any one of those bakers could win the season. It just depends on, you know, week after week. Any given Sunday, if I could use a football analogy.
And it also shows that baking is not just a middle-aged white lady's game
Totally.
or hobby. It's like people of all ages and backgrounds. So many people love to bake.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people got into baking during COVID when they had a lot more free time on their hands, and a lot of these baking shows were on, and they suckered you in.
Yeah. Well, it was the
That's
only thing
true.
that brought us joy. Like the only way you felt happy at the end of the day was like, oh, there is like 12 cups of sugar in this. I'm on it.
Right?
Like,
Absolutely.
this is going to get us through today.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what it was about. It was finding the comforts of life that gave you those little nuggets of joy to get you through to the next day.
Yeah. And look how many podcasts were born out of
Right.
the boredom of lockdown.
Finding the joy. That's exactly what we're about.
We've really adopted that tagline. That was actually Stephen Levitt, who was in season 5 of the Great Canadian Baking Show. He was one of the first people that we interviewed, and his wife gave him the advice when he was going into the tent. She just said, find the joy. Like, don't let this be a stressful thing. You love baking. You're in the tent with a bunch of other people who love baking. Just find the joy. And we love Steve. He's amazing. And so we've really adopted that, because that's what we have to do in everyday life, is find the joy, right? I love that.
Ah, that's very nice. How stressful, based on conversations you've had with all these contestants, how stressful do you think it really is? And how much of that is editing to make it look like it was?
Oh boy.
I think it's more stressful than it looks.
I think I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially Great Canadian Baking Show. It's baked outside. It's filmed outside in Toronto at the beginning of summer. And
Yeah.
if you know Toronto in the summertime, you get anything from massive thunder and lightning storms and always high humidity and stupid hot. And so we've talked to some of the bakers that have baked at some point, the tent was 45 degrees
Oh.
and they have to bake in this. Plus, you're not in your own kitchen. So you don't have your own tools that you're working with. The ovens are different.
Yeah.
Like all of the ingredients that they have access, they might not be the same that you get in the kitchen. And so all of those components, all of those pieces can lead you to different bakes. Plus, you're under time constraints and massive ones at that. It's a completely different ball game. So it's really like Survivor, not really baking in your kitchen. So again, you come back to the skill level. You have to have such a high level of skill to even make it into the tent. And if things go sideways in the tent, it's not because you're a bad baker. It's just because one of those elements just went against you. And it could be any number of them in
That's
there.
great. That's crazy. Because I always think like,
Jeez.
oh, it can't be quite that, where people are like looking frantic and they're sort of rushing and
Basically, the 6 weeks before you go on the show, you're given the briefs for at least the first half of the season, maybe the full season, and you have to practice them. You have to create your own recipes. You have to submit them to culinary. They have to approve them. They have to get pictures of your practice bakes for every single one of those bakes, right? And that's
wow.
20, well, not 24 because we're not counting the
Mhm.
technicals,
But 16.
there's 16 bakes that you essentially have to have
Jeez.
practiced. That is a huge process.
Mhm.
So I think we don't realize how much that they're putting into this.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I wondered about that. I didn't know that they knew ahead of time what they'd be making because they present it as though maybe you don't know.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
has to be very planned for the signature bake and the showstopper bake. Many of the other baking shows are not like that.
And sometimes, happy accidents can happen, even in those situations that, maybe you have to be good with it. You
Yeah.
just have to go with the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, all these things taste good,
Mhm.
but to make them look pretty and to have them turn out with sort of like what their expectations are, it blows my mind.
Agreed.
I agree. And considering on the technical bake, they don't actually have any pictures of what the end product is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
So, which that is crazy when you think
Yes,
about it. And
yeah.
for people like me, who's a very visual learner, that would be the biggest challenge, is to kind of go, okay, well, what is whatever that is supposed to even look like?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I won't even attempt something out of a cookbook if I don't know what the end product's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even when I'm all by myself and nobody is judging me at my house, am I going to do that?
Yeah, that's true. So I'd like to know, what is the most challenging baking recipe, project, assignment you personally, you each have taken on that maybe was like the big scary one? And how did it go?
I think the biggest challenge for me, my son got married. My son and my daughter-in-law got married about a year and a half ago. And I baked their wedding cake and all the desserts for the wedding, which was a very, very big task. And and very emotional, right? When it's our only son. And it was just a really special thing to be able to do. And it was it was great. But it was 2 weeks of solid baking and getting everything organized and having another freezer brought into our condo so I can store it all in.
Wow.
Full freezer, because it's a freezer that can turn into a fridge and back again. I just think that is amazing.
What?
Oh,
Isn't that
Very
neat?
good.
Yeah,
It's perfect.
I had never heard of it before, but I love it.
that's really smart.
My fridge freezer is like that.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to say, I wouldn't think that I can't say that it was like challenging, except for the fact that it was so important to me to get it right. And it was for a 50th anniversary cake for the parents of a friend of mine that I work with. And they had this, very like kitschy cake with all the like banners and swags and stuff. And it was
Oh.
square, and it was 3 three tiers and on pillars and everything. And she asked if I could reproduce that for their anniversary. And she wore her wedding dress and yeah. And
Oh,
so getting that right, making sure that it was a good tasting cake, but still was a good representation of what they had 50 years ago. Oh, I was obsessing over that,
You were.
wasn't I? Yeah, I was so excited when it turned out to look
It's gorgeous.
as I had imagined it to look, and then to put the two pictures side by side, 50 years apart. It was really emotional for me, and it made me super happy. So yeah, that was an important one.
Yeah, interesting that both of those were wedding cake. That's a big task to take on wedding cake because it's very important to people.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And
Yeah. Okay, so what about fails? Have you had something fail spectacularly?
Oh, never.
Never? No.
Baking
Oh, okay.
fails. We're perfect bakers, right? We have a whole segment on our social media about baking fails. We call them the baking craps. So absolutely.
I've seen that. I love the play on the name. Got me laughing. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, definitely had some
Daily.
big baking craps.
We at them a lot. And I just had one the other day. You were talking about, sourdough starter. Well, I accidentally microwaved mine.
Oh no.
I had my cup of tea that had gone cold. So I had put it in the microwave, and that's where I keep my starter, and put my cup of tea in and
Oh, no.
heated it up for 1.5 minutes like I usually do. Opened up my microwave, and staring at me was my sourdough starter container that I just went, oh
Oh
no,
no.
this is not a good thing. So anyway, that's my latest baking fail that I actually recorded, because I could record it after the fact that it happened.
And she did have the mama starter in her fridge.
I did, yeah. So I have extra.
Oh, lucky.
But yeah.
My latest baking crap was with a wedding cake, another one. One of my coworkers got married, and she had asked me to make her cake, and it was big. So you have to put dowels in your cake in order to support the weight of the tiers on top of it. But I ordered these plastic dowels off of Amazon. They just look like big bubble tea straws type of thing. And I was running low on them, and I didn't have any more of them or time to order more. And I had a couple that were full height that I cut for my very bottom tier. And then for some reason, I thought it would be okay to put a piece this big and a piece this big together and use that as a dowel. And I did that for two of the bottom dowels on the tier. That's ridiculous. That's not going to support the weight. The cake actually started to lean, so we had to move up the cake cutting time because it looked like it was going to go completely off the table.
Oh
Fortunately, the bride
Oh.
laughed it off. Well, I am in perimenopause, so this brain fog thing does happen.
Oh, yeah.
no. Yeah,
Area.
exactly.
I'll blame that.
That's a good one.
Are you enjoying our interview with the Baking Scraps?
I am.
Excellent. Then head over to your favorite podcast player and go check out their podcast.
Lisa and Cristina are bringing you baking tips and tricks. They're reviewing baking show episodes, sharing baking fails, which they like to call baking craps, and giving each other and their listeners challenges to try at home.
Baking Scraps is a must listen for all fans of home baking.
Okay, so as you had mentioned that you bake along with the show, I don't do that, but I do feel a little bit inspired by one of the cookie challenges where they were making a filled cookie.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Erin and I had a quick little chat about this, and we, for some reason, when we heard filled, we both kind of thought sandwich cookie,
Right.
but that's not really what they were talking about. A filled cookie is different than a sandwich cookie. So it made me think, because I just yesterday made a big pot of apple butter, and I was like, what can I do with my apple butter? Because I don't feel like canning. I'm just going to freeze some, but I want to use some. And I had this inspired moment when I watched that episode that I was going to make some kind of cookie filled with apple butter. So will apple butter serve as a good filling? And what kind of cookie could I, for a cookie, is there a certain kind of dough you need?
Yeah, this is interesting.
Good question.
I mean, I immediately go to those fall flavors, you know, it's those nice spices, like, but some kind of spice cookie, ginger, Something along those lines would be really nice.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to want to freeze your apple butter in dollops that you can put in the center of your cookie. You're going to want to have either a cutout cookie dough that you can make two circles and press them together, seal your edges together around the apple butter, or you're going to want to have one that you roll into balls and you put that frozen apple butter right in the middle and then roll it into a ball, and then it will spread out with the apple butter in the center.
Or I was thinking, I love those ideas. I think both of those would be fantastic. I was thinking actually, and I don't know if this would hold up necessarily, but I immediately thought of like an oatmeal kind of cookie. With the apple filling and maybe a little bit of, I love caramel, and caramel apples are my jam, but like with toffee, adding a little bit of toffee bits into your oatmeal cookie. And I was thinking maybe using a silicone mold and then filling it that way. So you would press in your cookie dough on the bottom and then add in your frozen dollop of the apple butter. And then cover it back up, and then again make sure your edges are sealed, and then bake it in the silicone mold.
Yeah, because when you do if you did the one where you roll it into a ball with everything in the center, then you run the risk of it spreading out.
This sounds delicious.
So we look forward to seeing your creations.
And for today's bake, you have 2 hours.
Yeah.
Go.
Ready, set, bake.
Totally. Oh, I can't wait. I will definitely share when I
Please do.
It's interesting to know because I wasn't sure if all cookie doughs would be resilient to being stuffed.
Well, not macarons.
Not macarons.
But you could do a macaron with the apple butter. That would be delicious.
Oh yeah,
with like a brown sugar buttercream.
Yeah, I'll just get rid of that.
It's okay. Heather's made macarons before. She can do it again.
Oh God. They wouldn't be winning any challenges, I'll tell you that. And I had to do it twice in the same day because the first batch they were like little wafers. They failed. And so I started it over and I did it again. And in the end, we got macarons.
They were still tasty though, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're so hard. I find them.
Okay, so Heather came up with this great little idea to wrap things up called Bake It or Buy It. And so we've got a list of fun things, well, maybe not so fun to make or bake sometimes, or should we leave this to the people in the factories or the experts
Love
to do
it. I love this segment.
Love it.
So she started out with macarons, and I feel like both of you have sort of already voted on that one.
Well, she'll make them.
I
will just avoid them
Oh, okay.
because I don't really like them. But I will
Okay.
hers.
Fair enough. That's fair. Okay. Bake it or buy it. Buche de Noel.
Oh, bake it.
Bake it.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, I've never made
You
one.
can do like chocolate bark on the outside, and you can make, all kinds of decorations.
Play with the filling.
Yeah.
Too
I
easy.
feel like I want to try that one. Now you have me being like, oh, that does sound like a lot of fun
Right?
to create and play with. As somebody who didn't know how to pronounce that at first, so I'm really glad Heather took it.
I put it in bracket. I did put you a log next to it in case
Is it like a jelly roll cake kind of idea? Like it's a soft cake that you're rolling up with a...
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never done that. Now I'm tempted.
Me either. I know. I always feel like it's going to crack and break as you roll.
You have to make sure that you roll it right away because you want it to kind of cool a bit in that shape. And then you have to really carefully unroll it to put the fillings on and then roll it back up.
Yeah, and wrap it up in like a tea towel. So roll it up so the tea towel is actually rolled in when it's still warm.
Sugar on the
With
tea
icing
towel.
sugar, because that protects it from it sticking to the tea towel.
Are you taking notes?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have time and I'll think about this.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Because you can make
fun.
and then freeze it. Saran wrap it really well, airtight. Stick it in your freezer and then take it out when you're ready to decorate it. It's a lot less stressful.
Ooh.
You can kind of chunk it down into pieces.
And when you're defrosting, so I routinely freeze all my cakes because that actually changes the chemical composition to make it nice and moist and delicious and beautiful.
Okay.
When you're defrosting something that you have frozen, whether it's just a cake round or if it's a fully decorated cake, which you can also freeze, make sure that you're defrosting it in the fridge and in the plastic wrap. because you want all the condensation that comes off the cake to go into the plastic wrap. When you take it off, you don't have all those little dots of moisture all over your cake.
Just gonna
She
write a
is-
couple more notes.
She is taking notes. I love it.
All this information is out there, but it can be so hard sometimes to extract it all because there's always a lot of writing in a lot of blogs. The recipes don't always have all this information in it. So I feel like these conversations are beautiful for learning. Okay, bake it or buy it, puff pastry.
Always bake it. I've never bought puff pastry ever.
I think it depends. So
Okay.
if I have the time, I will make it and bake it.
Okay.
But if I always usually have some store-bought puff pastry in my freezer.
I don't even
Ready
know
to
where
go.
to find that.
Really? It's in the freezer section.
Next to the pie shells that you probably
I don't
also
know where those are either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't mind it. I do both.
bake it or buy it. Baked Alaska.
Have you ever made baked
I've never made a baked Alaska.
Me
I've
neither.
never actually eaten a baked
Me
Alaska.
either. I dislike meringue very much.
So
Doesn't it
And-
have, it has meringue, right?
yeah, it has
that's
meringue
what I
on
thought.
top.
Yeah.
And you torch that, and then it's ice cream in
Yeah.
the middle, and I think it's got like a cake layer on the bottom.
I mean, I really think I would enjoy challenging myself to make it because I enjoy making ice cream and I
Yeah.
think, and it's fun to make meringue,
Yeah.
but I would have to have somebody take it off my hands to eat it because I would not want to eat it.
Yeah, and it's not one of my go-to desserts that would appeal to me necessarily.
I would never
Yeah.
order it somewhere or
Yeah.
buy it from somewhere. I would always try to make it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Bake it or buy it, opera cake.
Bake it.
Bake it.
We like to bake.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of aware that you're probably going to say bake
Yeah,
it for
for
most
most of the
things.
stuff.
We're seeing if we can find the weak spot.
Yeah.
No puff pastry, obviously.
I don't think it's a weak spot.
Okay, why don't we finish up with bake it or buy it? Oh no, I'm going to say it wrong, aren't I? Phyllo pastry?
Pastry?
Okay.
Buy it.
Buy it.
Buy it.
Okay, Erin, do you have a comment on that one?
I made it once and it was so easy to make.
Yeah,
Really?
I've made
Yeah.
it.
Thinness.
Yeah.
I get bored.
I made it in a way that you could do all the sheets at once. So you're not rolling out each one individually. They were all stacked and then they just had like was it
Like
cornstarch?
Cornstarch in between, right?
In between or something. And then as you rolled it, they all evenly rolled out and it made like a, your boots crunching in snow kind of sound when it's minus 30, like that styrofoamy sound,
Yes.
which was miserable, but it totally worked.
And so would you do it again? Like anytime let's say you had to make a spinach pie, would you do that? Would you make your own phyllo pastry again?
I haven't ever needed to,
Mhm.
so I haven't yet. Everybody liked it better though than the store-bought stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to try it again, I guess.
I feel good.
To try phyllo pastry
Are we
again.
doing that this afternoon?
No, we're not.
Oh boy, this has been a real pleasure. So nice to meet you both and to chat about baking show phenomenon and why we're all so obsessed with watching baking competitions. It's because they're so darn nice.
Yeah.
It feels like
Comforting.
Yes.
Yeah.
say that it feels like home when you're watching it. You just feel like you're invested in the bakers, you're invested in the outcome, you're interested in what they're doing and wanting to try it yourself. It's cozy all around.
Yeah. The other part of it is I think it actually does inspire people and it transcends generations. So it's something that you can watch with your kids. It's something that you can watch with your friends. It's something that you can watch with your parents and grandparents. Everybody kind of enjoys it all.
Yeah.
So it's really fun.
It brought us together.
Mm-hmm.
It brought all of us together, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap this up, can you remind our listeners where they can find your podcast and all of your socials?
Yes, you can listen to us on any streaming service. We are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, etc. So check your streaming platform and see if it's there under Baking Scraps. We also have the video versions on our YouTube channel, which is just the Baking Scraps. Very, very easy to find. We are on Instagram as
The Baking Scraps, and Baking Scraps under Facebook.
and TikTok.
Yeah, and we have TikTok, which is under Baking Scraps. Yeah.
Yes,
So just look up Baking Scraps and something will come up.
that is very
That's a
true.
resemblance of us.
And we will put the links to all those things in our show notes. So scroll on down and click and find these lovely ladies and all their guests talking about baking.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you both. And yeah, happy baking to you.
Happy baking.
Thank you.
you.
And now for the fine print. For links to recipes and many other random things we talked about in this episode, check out the show notes or our website, www.threekitchenspodcast.com. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok to see what we're cooking up next. And if you love the show, tell a friend. Word of mouth is the #1 way people learn about new podcasts. Thanks for listening.
It's definitely not the baker. It's always something else. So